Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross. I am in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. This week, that list includes Immortality, A Little to the Left, and Pentiment.
Ah. Played some Pentiment.
Are you familiar with that game?
I've watched a little bit of it. I really enjoy the art style. I did not really have it pegged as something you would be into, though, so I'm curious to hear what you think of it.
I contain multitudes, DJ.
All right.
The minute you try to figure me out, I pivot.
Yeah.
I'm all fighting games next year. Fighting games.
Oh, man. I can't wait. You're just going to go
Madden,
into hibernation.
just Madden around the clock.
Fall Street Fighter 6 and Madden next year.
That's it.
Amazing.
I guess this serves as a warning to our listeners. Unsubscribe now. Next year is all Madden all the time.
Well, they got a couple of weeks left before they have to unsubscribe.
This is true. Not now, but a plan ahead at the very least.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man, It's been a long time since I've been really into fighting games, but that Street Fighter 6 looks so good.
Does it?
Everything they put out, they're just like really going for it. It's impressive.
I think it's the thing that I've heard about it that I think is interesting is that it has like a lobby now where you can just sort of like inhabit a character and futz around and kind of fight with other people while you're waiting for a turn to get into a fight. Yeah. And to get to the fight, you have to wait in line at an arcade machine.
Yeah. That's been popping up. Like they have that in a few other fighting games now, sort of like the virtual arcade.
Oh, cool. I had not heard of that happening before, and someone was describing it on another podcast or Twitter or wherever I consume craziness. I was like, oh, that's kind of but one of my sort of surprising things about Splatoon 3 is it now has a lobby too where you can kind of hang out and screw around and spray paint things with ink and yada yada. And I'm like, is that sort of the requirement now? The Fortnite mandated requirement for all multiplayer games have to have some kind of lobby where you can, just be silly.
I mean, it's not the worst idea.
No.
I think especially since, they're like arcades, especially in the US, are not super common anymore. It kind of brings back part of that experience of just like hanging out with people. And I think you can, I mean, don't quote me on this. I think you can just sort of observe other people playing Street Fighter while you're waiting in line. And I think there are other Capcom arcade games that they're throwing in there that you can just play, I guess, instead of Street Fighter 6 if you don't feel like playing that, which is like, it's also super fun. That's just one of the things though that really just looks really exciting about that game.
Yeah. The
actual fighting looks really good. The whole art and design looks incredible. But the little virtual arcade thing, it feels like they're really going above and beyond. Yeah.
I don't have a point of reference for the base game, but just the description of that lobby system sounded very cool.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that they were going to drop other video games in there, which is extra cool too.
Yeah, I think some of them are just other Capcom fighting games, which is like, why not? I mean, it feels like, I wonder how many people are going to show up just to play those other games that are not Street Fighter 6, but that's cool too.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be a fairly, I don't know if common, but it was a unique thing that used to be with one of the old Animal Crossing games. You could get a Nintendo to plug in your house and you could play versions of old Nintendo games on it. Inside Animal Crossing. And so, I always think that's super fun when that happens.
Like every Yakuza game that's come out has had some actual Sega arcade game that you can just, decide to ignore the rest of the story campaign and just like waste away your life playing arcade games. That's cool.
I mean, that is admittedly like every distraction in, and I've only played the new Yakuza game, the Like a Dragon, but like the side quests in that, the little distractions like the baseball batting cages and what else is in there, throwing darts and and the management sim, like, are video games in and of themselves. So yeah, there's a lot of things in Yakuza that get you to do stuff that is not Yakuza.
Yeah. I just think it's funny because a lot of those, like, there are so many side games. And they range from like, oh, well, I could play this silly little like kart racing game.
Go-karting,
which
exactly,
which is maybe amusing for a couple hours. Or I could just become a master of like Virtua Fighter 5, spend the next 2,000 hours of like logging into Yakuza and just playing this fighting game instead. I think it's really hysterical. Or, you could play Mahjong. That's also quite involved from what I hear.
Yeah, I think I did a bit of that. But the management one was the one. And there is a level up loop connected to that. I think that is a very one of the things you can kind of exploit in Yakuza Like a Dragon to get your characters leveled pretty aggressively and make money, which is hard to come by in that game.
That's the one that gets you the most sort of like tangible in-game benefits. Nobody's really impressed at how good you are at Virtua Fighter.
Yeah. And I didn't understand it at people would be very impressed if I was good at Virtua Fighter, yes, I'm sure. But yeah, like I totally did not comprehend the management sim. And for our listeners' sake, that you have a small pool of money and you get to invest in other corporations and little mom and pop shops and upgrade their facilities and expand their ability to. One of the things you make was rice crackers, right? You could buy a company that makes rice crackers.
Yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah,
then you're expanding into like casinos and hotels and things.
Right. And as obviously the kitty of money that you have available to invest in businesses becomes larger, you become this, corporate tycoon. I think maybe you and Paul certainly helped me with some little pro tips. And I watched a video on YouTube of like how to master the management sim. And then that is all I did for like 20 hours in that game.
Oh, yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just a black hole. And I was like, oh, wait, there is another game I should play here.
When is the next Yakuza game coming out? Now I'm kind of in the mood for, and I'm not even thinking about the campaign, but I'm just like, what other weird side games have I missed out on?
Yeah, because you can't
need to go back
kart
and
racers
play
or baseball anywhere else.
Right? Yeah. Who wants to play a kart racer though? I want to be, sending my employees off to weekend training or whatever.
When is the new one? Is that supposed to be 2023?
I don't remember. They were on kind of an annual kind of deal for a while, but I don't know if they've announced it for next year. They've got a bunch of projects coming out though. They've got that like the samurai version and like the little like prologue chapter which brings Kiryu back. So I don't know if any of these have been dated, actually. I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, it's been a while since that Like a Dragon. Probably should get back into that. Like a Dragon Ishin, I think. Yeah, it's the one in feudal Japan or whenever that takes place.
Oh, is it like that's a sequel or a spin-off?
It's like a spin-off, yeah.
Interesting.
Looks amazing.
Yeah, I can't keep up, but I'm intrigued. Cool. Where did we start? Where did that come from? I don't know how we landed on that, but it was video games inside other
Street Fighter.
Games.
Oh, you're only playing Street Fighter from now on.
That's it.
We're still committed to that, I think. Now that you've said
it
here, there's just you can't take it back anymore.
No. I mean, once it's on the internet, it's forever.
I hear. I mean, not to just turn this into a Street Fighter episode, but they're adding a bunch of options for people who have just no fighting game experience at all. And the most recent one I found especially fascinating because it's basically they wanted to make a control scheme for people who mash buttons, but they wanted to take that sort of like kind of chaotic input. Like there's nothing really intentional about that, but somehow turn it into something that feels satisfying as you're playing. Because it's like, if you're just mashing buttons, who knows what's going to happen? But they're trying to work it into something where your character just starts doing special moves and combos and things like that.
Oh.
Which is a really interesting approach. I really have to applaud sort of there are all these attempts to make it more accessible to people. Because fighting games, not the most accessible genre.
No.
Really curious to see how it turns out, though.
Yeah. But mashing is very much my style. Not like I have a lot of opportunities to like get my hands on a fighting game, but
sure.
Yeah. Every now and then venture into a Smash Brothers scenario where I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I'll just slam on buttons until something does.
Yeah.
And try really hard to not fall off the map.
Just imagine though, if you're like mashing buttons as you usually do, but you were just dominating.
I think that would be super frustrating for everybody who tried really hard to be good at that game.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is I don't know how they're planning to balance it against other players. Like, if you'll be able to use this online against other people. I think they might have already mentioned it's not in every mode, but again, I'm not totally sure. It does seem like, yeah, you don't want to show up to Evo or whatever, and you're just like, all right, you're up against the button masher for the grand finals. The computer is going to do all the work for him. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But no, good on them for just trying to get more people into it. Because, like you said, I used to be really into fighting games. I think this new one looks super fun. Yeah. But I'm not always... don't know if I'm super inclined just to be playing it online against people all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that can be super... The prospect of getting into a series as... as well established as something like Street Fighter or Yakuza or Madden or any of those other places, Assassin's Creed 19 or whatever number they're up to, it can seem really overwhelming to like, is this the point where I jump in? Do I have to have played the previous 18 games to understand what's going on or to know what I'm doing? So yeah, I think they're, to a certain degree, developers owe gamers an opportunity to catch up. And I think you've been very clear on sort of saying that the Monster Hunter games have been pretty good at that the last couple of iterations and being, newbie accessible. So
yeah, well, kind of
quasi newbie accessible.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely more accessible than they have been in the past, but I think they still have a ways to go.
Yeah, but it has not slowed down their ability to lure new people into the fold.
Oh yes, yeah, they've made some impressive strides there.
So yeah, if I in the year of our COVID 2023 decided this is the year I'm going to play fighting games, I don't know if Street Fighter is the place I would start. It would feel like a very overwhelming prospect.
Well, I mean, I would almost think that Street Fighter 6 may be the best place to start, but we'll see how it works out once it
I guess
comes out.
It's not out yet, so to be determined.
Yeah. And if that's not your thing, you can just hang out in the virtual arcade and play like Street Fighter 2.
Yeah. I'm down. Let's do it. Before we get to 2023, though, we do have a couple episodes left in 2022. And one of them is sort of our grand season finale, the Drunktacular.
Yeah.
What's the Drunktacular, DJ? Tell
what is it?
Tell the people about it.
Well, as you mentioned, it's our last show of the year. It's kind of special. What's happening this year is we're doing a live show on, did I get this right? Friday, December 9th. Yes.
Correct. Yep.
So that'll be live on Twitch. But for most of these, we spend them answering your listener submitted questions and also enjoying some adult beverages just to, speed the evening along. I don't know why I said it like that. It sounds like I'm just trying to get it over with, but it just, it makes for kind of a nice little end of the year holiday atmosphere as we're answering these weird questions you've sent in. Yeah.
It's very much a last day of school kind of vibe. Like, not that I ever got drunk on the last day of school.
It's like, well, I don't know what classes were like at your school.
As soon as I made that analogy, I was like, oh, I've painted myself into a corner. But
kids getting blasted in fourth grade.
Yeah. DJ and I try really hard to make sure that we have an episode up at least, every week. And that's been one of the things we've kind of stood by as long as we've been doing this crazy thing, which is now going into 12 years, right?
Oh, it's a lot of years.
Yeah, it's a lot of years. So the only period that we take any couple of weeks off is generally right around the holidays. So yeah, it is kind of a last day of school. We're going right into our summer vacation.
That's true. Yeah, I like that you put it that way.
Yeah. Good. I've brought it back to my weird analogy now.
Okay. But anyway, so it's a lot of fun. We hope you'll join us on the live stream on December 9th. But before that, as we said, we need your listener questions. So those can be about anything you're curious to know about. What? Like video games. We usually start with video game questions. Usually get a lot of really clever Sort of like we've done the favorite video game gun question. It's always fun.
We get a lot of desert island questions if you had to play a specific game on a desert island where somehow you had power and a PlayStation. What game would that be? Yeah. Yeah. Not to scare anybody off from asking us those questions. If you're curious about those things again, perhaps we've updated our desert island lists.
Oh yeah.
This would be the place to ask.
But anyway, so you can send in a video game related question, or really just ask us about anything you're curious about. Maybe, as we said last week, you're trying to fix your car and you don't know what's wrong with it. Maybe Randy is the one that gets you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, maybe don't ask us for auto repair advice, or maybe do. Who knows? But bottom line, they can be about whatever you want. Just make sure you send them in by the end of Thursday, December 8th, so we can get them all collected in time. And you can send those in on Twitter, which still, it's hanging in there, it seems like.
Yeah.
You can go to twitter.com/VGHangover. You can join our Discord and put a question in one of the chats there. You can email contact@VGHangover.com. Or, as the special super deluxe option, you can call in on your phone, dial 682-999-VGH1, and leave us a little voice message. And we will play that on the show before responding to it. So that would be very fun.
Yeah, it'll be like you're in the room with us.
Yeah, it'll be exactly like that.
And since DJ and I are not in the same room, that'd be extra weird.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That would be kind of spooky.
You can get all that information again at VGHangover.com/drunk. And the clock is ticking. We have a very little time left for you to be able to get these questions and stuff into us. So you have until Thursday, December 8th for us to include them in our show on Friday, December 9th. Lots more information.
About a week.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, a week from when the show comes out.
Right. But lots more information at VGHangover.com.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that'll be fun. Should be a good one.
Have you given any thought to your adult beverage of choice for this year?
I don't know. I feel like I went real big last year. It was very complicated. If you remember, I was like making cocktails. I might try and keep it simple this year. I kind of alternate. Like one year I'll just have this incredibly elaborate production, and then the next year I just want to break. So I think this might be one of the lower effort years.
Yeah. I have an awesome assortment of breweries in Harrisburg. Harrisburg is a good beer town. So I've been cycling through crowlers and assorted craft beers over the last couple of years. I tend to not go super complicated. I don't really drink a lot of cocktails in my adult life.
Yeah, I don't really either.
I'm a beer guy.
Just one night a year.
Yeah. So yeah, why break from tradition? I may have to see what's on the menu at some of the breweries near me and maybe pick up a couple of fine craft ales to share with our crowd.
Yeah, sounds good.
What are you playing this week? Awkward segue.
It was pretty good. Man, I've been playing a little bit of everything. It's that sort of the game of the year season, and I'm looking back on my list, just going like, did I play any good games this year?
Did I play a game in the year?
Yeah. Well, the question is not did I play any good games, but did I play any good games that were from this year?
Right.
Because I tend to dip into the backlog a little bit. So, yeah, I don't know. I've been all over the place. I've been trying to finish up some stuff that I was in the middle of from this year so I can talk about it in January. Been trying to wrap up Live Alive. Remember that game?
Nice.
That came out?
That was this year?
It was. This year in like 1993 or whenever it eventually, So I get to cheat on that one a little bit.
Right. It was 2 of the last 25 years. Yes.
Yeah. I've been playing a lot more of the Planet Crafter. Got my base all set up, which has been fun. I had a real scary moment where I forget if I got into it when we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but the water levels were rising around my outpost.
You did mention that when we were talking about it a couple weeks ago, and on DJ's Twitter, there is a picture of the water slowly encroaching on his home base. And I was no.
I kept looking at it. I was like, oh, well, it's higher than it was before. So I built a little structure that was just to sort of mark where the water line was. And then in half an hour, I came back and it was completely submerged. And I just thought, oh, that's not good. I don't really know how to stop the water level from rising. And suddenly this game, which had been sort of my retreat, where I would just go and be like, I'm going to mine minerals for half an hour before bed, turned into this incredibly anxiety-inducing thing where it's just like, I would look at my base and see all the little modules I had set up and, very carefully arranged around, and just look over to the other side and there'd be the lake slowly but surely creeping up on it. To the point where I was like thinking about it while I wasn't even playing the game anymore. I was just like, I wonder how my base is doing. Like, I don't think the water level is rising while I'm not playing, but I was worried about it.
Yeah. Enjoy that brief moment of high property value when your house is suddenly on the beach.
Yeah. Kind of uncomfortable parallels as I'm playing this. But eventually, I think it got to the point where it just stops rising, which I was very grateful to realize. Because I was like, I think what happened was I was playing it and just stressing out incredibly about how close the water was getting to my base. And then a little achievement popped up that says you have achieved like lakes on your unterraformed planet. You've got the lakes achievement. And I think that was the sign that it had gotten as high as it was ever going to get. And sure enough, the last few hours I've been in there, it has not moved beyond the latest sort of high water mark that I put down.
Good. I mean, it has to stop eventually, because at some point, if it just kept going, it would just be Waterworld, right? You would just completely flood out the entire map. So there has to be a point.
Would be there. It'd just be like, what's going on?
There'd be a point at which the thing that is melting and creating the lake, it no longer has anything left to melt.
Yes. Just be like, well, we did it. We brought, I guess, water to this, previously arid world, but now there's not really anywhere for us to live. So that was a huge relief, and now I'm back into being able to enjoy that game, and still very, very fun.
And now begins the season of fire.
Jeez. Next comes the quietus, or whatever was going on in Harvestella.
Yeah. You survived the season of water, and now, I don't know, a plague, a pox on your house.
Yeah. Next is locusts or whatever.
Right, yes, yeah.
Oh, man.
Do we make that game? Somebody should make that game. That'd be fun. You have to run a farming
surviving
simulator.
The plagues of Egypt or whatever.
Sure. But just like, the world throws everything at you, where it's like locust season. It has a little timer with a little arm that moves. You go from locusts to COVID. I don't know where you go with it from there.
I was going to say that's just SimCity, where, random natural disasters just ruin your city every once in a while. But I don't think they ever had locusts, or not in the versions that I played anyway.
They know, just the Bible edition of SimCity, where it's locusts and, I don't know, your wife turns into a pillar of salt. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. It's probably not appropriate. So
I feel like there are just so many games out there at this point that has to exist. We'll get on that. We'll play it for Extra Life next year.
Yep.
But anyway, so I'm just playing everything and trying to wrap stuff up. And it's taken me back to this game I started several months ago called Immortality, which is the latest sort of interactive, full motion video game from Sam Barlow, who made Her Story and Telling Lies a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay.
But so if you played any of these, I mean, you're probably kind of familiar with his general type of work. Her Story was a really amazing sort of like video interview game where you were combing through a bunch of police video footage or police interview footage. And you're basically a detective trying to piece together all these sort of interconnected video clips to get an idea of what was going on in like the backstory of this character who was being interviewed. And it was super good. It was like really unique and clever format. Really made me feel like I was doing like a real investigation, or I don't know how it actually goes down with these police interview tapes, but it was just so compelling. I couldn't tear myself away from it. And he's put together a couple other sort of projects like this over the last few years, and Immortality is his latest one, which is kind of similar in premise, but he's changed up the format quite a bit. So the core mystery in Immortality is surrounding this movie star, Marissa Marcel, who is a fictional movie star. And the conceit is that she made 3 movies in her career. None of them ever came out for whatever reason. And then she herself has now vanished. And somehow you're in possession of all these, like a new library of video clips. And it's up to you to root through these things, sort of as you did in her story, to just figure out the mystery of what happened to Marissa Marcel.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, so I should say that like her story was, I think it was my game of the year that year. And it's just like one of my favorite games of all time. So I was super excited to see kind of coming back to this format.
There's a game, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a game between Immortality and her story as well, right?
There were a couple, yeah. He did like a War Games project, which was more of an interactive TV show. But I think the one you're referencing, it's much more, it's very similar to her story and format. It's called Telling Lies.
There you go. That sounds familiar.
And you would go through basically like web chat recordings and sort of search through those. I think you had a search prompt in that as well. Like in her story, you would type in search queries into a computer and it would bring up related footage. I forgot what you were doing in Telling Lies. I think you might have been doing the same thing. But the mechanic in Immortality is very different. It's one of the most interesting new features about it, in that you no longer have the text prompt, so you're not typing anything in anymore. Basically, what happens is it starts you out watching one of these interview clips. And then, I should set up the what you're actually watching through. So you have these assorted clips from these 3 movies that Marissa Marcel was in, because she made 3 movies over a period of like 30 years. And you essentially have what I imagine is the entirety of sort of like the whole runtime of the film. And then all these like ancillary clips of like sort of behind the scenes footage and cast interviews and TV interviews, like late night show kind of stuff. That all ties back to it. And it all goes into this massive video library. But then to search through it, like first of all, you're presented with a clip and you can scrub through it like back and forth as you would like using any like video player. But then at any point in the clip, you can like pause it and hover over pieces of it and click on like points of interest, whether it is a character in the scene or maybe some like prop that's in the background or just a lot of objects of interest in the scene. And what it does at that point is it links you over to some other clip in the library with either the same character or a similar object to whatever you clicked on. And they call it, what do they call it? It's like match cut. So it's not quite as directed or it's not quite as like deliberate as you typing in some keyword that came up like you would do in her story. But it's really interesting because it ends up creating sort of like this fluid transition between all these different clips, whether that means you're like following a character through a bunch of these different sort of films, or you're like trying to see like all the different scenes that a particular object or like type of object appeared in. It's a really interesting way to just sort of navigate all this film footage, which feels very overwhelming at first, just because it seems like there's potentially so much of it to deal with.
And is it sort of like a YouTube black hole where you sort of like go down related video after related video after related video and you kind of forget your way back to the thread that got you there in the first place? How does the game kind of keep you on a path?
That's pretty much exactly what happens, is that you end up just going through all these clips. I don't know if did you play her story?
I haven't, no.
Okay. It's kind of a similar experience in that when I was playing that game, I would be watching these clips and I have a notepad with me. And whenever I would think of something like, oh, here's something I should type into the search thing after I finish watching this clip, I would just jot it down. And I would end up with this huge list of keywords that I wanted to get into. But in Immortality, it's slightly different because, there's nowhere to enter into keywords, and there's not even really anything, or at least in my experience, it's difficult to just stop and like write things down because it doesn't really keep that sort of breadcrumb trail. Like you could just hit back in your web browser as you're watching stuff on YouTube to get back to the previous thing. But it doesn't really maintain that in Immortality. So it almost feels like you're encouraged to just keep going and sort of keep digging, keep going down the YouTube rabbit hole as you like go through these clips. Which at times has been a little frustrating because sometimes I'll be watching a clip and there'll be a couple things, like I think there'll be like a few leads that I want to follow up on, but you can only really pick one without having to like completely drop out of whatever you're watching and go back to the film grid and like find the original clip again and go back through it. So I kind of just go with the flow most of the time. Like I'll tab over to another clip and maybe there's going to be a brand new point of interest in this one, so I'll just click on that instead and end up watching this entirely different thing.
And you're trying to figure out why didn't her movies come out and where did she go?
More or less, yeah. It's funny because there's not really, like, you don't have a checklist of things like, okay, find out why this happened and find out why this other thing happened. It's really just you're playing this until you're satisfied with your own understanding of the events.
Oh, interesting.
There's that great post on, I think it was like the Steam Her Story forum, where some hapless Steam user was just like, how do I know when I'm done with the game? And the developer, I think, posted back and they said, well, it's up to you to decide, when you're personally satisfied with what you've uncovered. They just replied back with like, well, so how do I know when I'm satisfied? So it's really like a lot of it is
boss
just
at the end yet.
Right. Yeah. You'll know when the boss has 0 health left when you've completed her story 100%. But it feels like the same deal with this. And I have to say, starting off, it's quite intimidating. It just feels like you're jumping right at the deep end of all this video footage. Because, like, I don't know, are there really 3 movies worth of footage in this game that I have to scrub through? Or is there like 6 hours of like 3 full movies in here? Plus all the side interviews and everything? Like, that's a lot to go through just a clip at a time.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of in awe of the creative undertaking of sort of deciding that this is your style. This is, Sam Lake is his name?
Sam Barlow.
Sam Barlow. Sam Lake is the...
Yeah, you're thinking of the Max Payne guy.
Max Payne guy, yeah. Sam Barlow, like, all of his things, all of his video games are full motion video. So, he's writing a script. He's directing real actors and sets and things like that. And it's just making a video game is a big undertaking, but making one that is a video game but is also a movie, and in this case 3 movies, I just can't imagine the scale of a production like that. I'm overwhelmed just thinking of how to sort of navigate that as a concept. So I can only imagine sort of what it feels like to just sort of dive in.
It's kind of mind-blowing just thinking about like the production side of this, like how involved it must have been to actually design this. Because it's not even that they've just filmed 3 movies, like potentially 3 full movies. I don't know how much they actually filmed. But a lot of it is sort of unfinished footage. Like you'll see the little, like, what is that thing? Like the clapper board before they yell action. So that's kind of interesting as well, because a lot of the times in these clips, you'll get sort of just kind of incidental stuff and conversations that were happening before and after the action like started or wrapped in a clip. And that leads to a lot of interesting clues occasionally. So it's like they shot all of that. They shot all these weird sort of like cast interviews. There's just so much that went into all of this. And then they have to string it all together in a way that like makes sense as a game where
right.
You're led around in just who knows what people are going to click on. But they have to design it in a way where it presents things to you sort of in a satisfying order, where you're not just taking immediately to like key revelations and everything.
Right. Without having a construct in place that funnels you through that order.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have no idea how they like they must have like sketched this all out beforehand.
Right.
Like in her story, I imagine it was slightly easier because everything came down to like words that were in the script. So if they didn't want you to randomly type in something that would take you to key footage towards the end of the game, quote unquote, they would just, I imagine they would just tailor the script to not include those sort of obvious keywords.
Right.
But in this, it just feels like you're swimming in this deep sea of video footage. Who knows what they're going to land on next? Like, I can't even tell really, like, how far through the game I am. There have definitely been points where I feel like I have a much better understanding of the, like, first of all, just the plots of these films and sort of the chain of events that tie them all together. But then I'll see a clip that has some actor that I've never seen before, whether they're in the scene or they're just like standing in the background or something, or maybe there's an especially sort of compelling object. Like sometimes they'll let the camera linger on an object for maybe a little more than you would actually have in a movie, but it's sort of a clue like, oh, this is probably significant and I should chase this lead down.
And you zoom in and there's a little post-it note that says, click me, click me.
Yeah, there's like just a big neon arrow pointing to it.
Yeah.
But it's been really amazing. That's sort of been in the back of my head the whole time I'm playing this. It's just like, how did they even make this? It's just mind-blowing.
That's cool. I've read a bit about a bit more about this game than his previous ones, and it's outside of video game enthusiast press. It was like Washington Post or New York Times, or some piece of mainstream media was sort of like, look at this guy who makes movies that are also video games. I think he's definitely carrying that torch and keeping that torch lit for full motion video in games. There's not a lot of other developers that are going this hard at it, I think, at this point. I have a memory of light gun games with and things like that used that in the past, and it was always super cheesy and goofy. It certainly seems like this developer is trying to elevate it to something that feels a little more deliberate and legitimate.
Oh yeah. This has come a long way since like Mad Dog McCree or whatever.
Right. I couldn't remember the name of it, but that was the one I had in mind. Yeah.
Night Trap and all that good stuff.
Oh God. Yep.
Yeah. So still doing an amazing job. My only complaints about it so far is that it just seems it's so overwhelming. Like her story was kind of intimidating to get into just because like who knows how long this game is going to last. Am I ever going to be able to actually track down the key clips that I want? I have no idea. And I'm just playing through this, like expecting it to end at some point. But I also feel like there's a very real possibility that I could just miss key clips and just not find sort of the critical path through these things. But it does feel like it's slowly but surely coming together. So I'm just going to keep on like clicking through stuff, and hoping I end on the right sort of path eventually.
Just a white screen that says you have reached the end of the internet.
Yeah, like this is it. You watched all the clips. Interestingly, so there are Steam achievements for having viewed all like the entirety of the footage from each of the 3 movies. So there's like 3 achievements, and I don't have any of those yet. But that'll be a very clear indicator that I've at least seen the entire film.
Yeah. Achievements serve some tangible function in that situation.
Yeah. Occasionally something will pop up, and a lot of the achievements so far have been like, oh, you've clicked on 3 instances of like fruit or an animal or in these scenes, and it feels like I'm making progress, even though like that probably has no bearing on like, okay, you're not truly done with Immortality until you've clicked on 3 clips with an apple in them or whatever.
Right. And little do you know that you've clicked on 3 of the 496 apples in this game. Yeah.
Oh man, can you imagine? At least it's a sign that I'm not purely going in circles as I go through these clips, because sometimes I'll watch something and think like, oh, have I seen this scene before? Would it be worthwhile to watch again? I don't really know.
Is it possible in sort of the weirdly nonlinear like structure of this thing to get back to a clip you've already seen, but then click on something else in the scene that takes you to a different direction, or is that how it's supposed to work?
Yeah. That's basically how it's designed. Like there are so many different ways you can exit a scene and get transferred to another one.
So you're like, oh, I clicked on the apple last time. I should click on the cat this time.
Yeah, exactly. It's also kind of interesting because you'll be transported to another scene very often in the middle of the new scene. So you have to stop and think like, okay, so do I want to watch it from this specific point that it's directed me to, or do I want to rewind all the way back to the beginning? Maybe I'll get more context that way.
Oh, interesting. But what information am I giving up the access to by chasing the next lead?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just a lot of stuff to consider.
Yeah.
And ultimately just you spend a lot of time kind of going over the same clips over and over again. But it has just been like in the same way as her story was. I've been kind of glued to my screen every time I come back to this.
Very cool.
And hopefully someday I will understand what happened to Marissa Marcel.
I wonder if this would have I don't know if you could speak to this, like value as a spectator game, because I sometimes I find that like if I'm going to take over the living room TV, I want it to be something that Sarah, who sits on the other end of the couch, would have some, casual investment in. Because every now and then I play video games where she like shouts out ideas and things like that, or like, you should try this. And I know that like I've got her, at least for a second, I've got her attention, because mostly she doesn't care about the video games that I play. Mm-hmm. I have to think that something like Her Story or Immortality would be a good like crowd game where you could have people with ideas and theories and you're all kind of kicking around like, no, click on the cat, click on the apple.
Oh yeah. No, I think this would be great. It's because you're not really like anybody could just shout out like, oh yeah, click on that thing. Or if you're playing Her Story, like, oh, what if you typed in this word? Like what comes up in the archive if you put in this word? Right.
Or sharing theories about where it's going.
Yeah. That's also another good angle. And then the rest of the time you're just watching a movie or a TV show. So if you're into mysteries, then yeah, I think this would be a great sort of couch co-op experience.
Cool. To keep that in mind.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's about all I want to say on it. I really, I don't want to drop any spoilers or anything. In fact, I want to encourage people, like, man, don't even read a review of this, because I've seen a couple reviews that almost immediately got into like massive spoilers.
Oh no.
And I think a lot of this is there's just so many surprises baked into this that you don't want to have ruined for you. So try and go into it as blind as possible. I think it would really benefit the experience.
Cool.
Does some really amazing stuff. There are some like genuinely kind of shocking moments that I think are only possible because of this weird format that he settled on this time around, which has been really unique. Like kind of a different experience than just watching a non-interactive movie from start to finish. Cool. So really cool, really just another incredibly unique experience.
I'll have to put this on my list. I'm intrigued. I have Her Story. I have it on my phone. It came out for Android a while ago, and it's just been sitting on my phone. I think I got a new phone in the last 3 or 4 months, and I just transferred it to the new phone and still have not played it. So
just carrying it with you, just unplayed for decades.
It's just like Her Story and what's the other one we like? The Lunar Golf, golfing on the moon. Yeah. Desert Golf, excuse me. They just carry those 2 things on every phone.
That's all you need.
Yeah. So I should play that at some point. But yeah, the prospect of playing Immortality on the big TV in my living room and maybe Sarah and I can get into it together. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I think you'd be into
PC
it.
only at this point?
It might be on Xbox, but I'll have to double check on that.
Cool.
I've been playing it on Steam, so hence the Steam achievements.
Right. Excellent.
But yeah, super cool. Always really excited when Sam Barlow has a new project out.
Cool.
What have you been into?
2 games I want to share. One is called A Little to the Left. This is a cool little indie puzzle game that came out a few weeks ago. It coincided with the last indie direct that Nintendo did. It was one of those sort of like, here's the trailer, and by the way, it's available in the eShop today. Which also always feels very exciting when that happens. This feels very similar to Unpacking, which I reviewed earlier in the year, which is a game essentially where you have it's the story of this person's life through all of the houses and apartments that they lived in. And you learn more about them and their relationships and their interactions by taking things out of boxes and finding places around their house to put their stuff, their lifetime of accumulation. A little to the left has a kind of very surprisingly similar approach, where you are organizing things in a couple's house that have been disrupted or disorganized by their precocious cat.
Oh, okay.
So
it's a good premise.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. So you get like a plate that the cat has knocked off a table, and you're trying to sort of glue it back together. So you have to sort of rearrange all the puzzle pieces, essentially, of a broken plate back into something that looks like a plate. Or you have, what are some of the other ones? Like kitchen implements that have been knocked over and spilled, and you have to put them in some order that seems elegant. So if it's my kitchen, I have like a little a bowl, a jar essentially that has all like the spatulas and the spoons and the scrapers and all that stuff in it. Imagine knocking one of those over and having to put it back together in some way that is sort of satisfying and organized in some way that sort of whoever's going to use it the next time can kind of make sense of your organization process.
I don't know if I think it through that much. I just put stuff in there until they're all in there. Or the game is really asking you to be more considerate.
Right. So and it's cool because some of the puzzles, they're quick puzzles, have multiple solutions, which means it sort of satisfies different, I guess, organization styles. So if you're the kind of person who keeps all of your big spoons and spatulas and things in a drawer, one of the solutions for that puzzle is you can stack them in decreasing size order. So the biggest spoon and spatula is on the bottom, and they all kind of nest inside of each other. Mm-hmm. Or you can sort of put them in the jar by size order, by biggest spoon to little spoon, just sort of in the jar. Some of the puzzles have varying solutions like that. So there's one where you've got a bunch of books that you can only sort of see by the spine. And you can line them up by creating a big image with the little picture on the spine of each book. Mm-hmm. So that they kind of like merge together in some satisfying way and create a bigger image. Or you can just line them up on the shelf by order of size, kind of biggest book to smallest book.
Well, don't do that. That sounds insane. It's like people who organize their books by color. Or people who do like the paper out on bookshelves. I see that on design shows a lot, where it's not the book cover facing out. It's just the page. The raw end pages. And I'm like, oh, that's insane. How do you find anything? So a little to the left is a puzzle after puzzle after puzzle of all of that. It can be a series of Polaroids that you have to put in order in some way that sort of feels satisfying. So you can have all of your pictures of your cat on one side of the page inside the book, and pictures of your travels, like beach and stuff like that, on the other side. Or you can put them together in some order that tells a story, where the images sort of naturally flow into each other. And the game is kind of smart enough to accept both of those answers as possibilities. Interesting.
Yeah. And you just go from puzzle to puzzle. There's one where you're trying to set a table, and it's a placemat and a plate and a fork and a knife and a cup and stuff like that. And as you're trying to build it, there's a little cat paw that comes out and kind of swipes the knife away and pushes the plate away. And it's played on the Switch with a touchscreen mostly. You can use the sticks, and it puts up a little like virtual cursor of a hand, but it never feels right to do that. So I'm just touchscreen the whole thing, which means the screen of my OLED is disgusting. So I've had to clean it like 3 times in the last 3 days from my grubby fingers. But so as the cat's hand comes out to like swipe the knife away, you can tap on his little paw and he'll pull it away, and it'll come in from some different side of the screen. So it's you have a little adversity in that regard. You have the satisfaction of sort of organizing things and putting things together in a way that sort of feels satisfying to whatever part of your brain that impacts. Yeah, it's an odd little game because it makes a puzzle out of things that are just sort of like organizing kind of the detritus of your life.
Mm-hmm. How much of it, is it pretty intuitive? You can just put stuff where you would naturally go to put stuff, or does it make you figure out like, oh, these need to be in size order or whatever?
It seems to fluctuate because I've had a few frustrating puzzles where I sort of feel like I've done the thing you want me to do. Because it doesn't give you any context. You'll start a puzzle with just a bunch of random things kind of strewn around, like a bunch of Polaroid pictures. And you have to sort of like move them around the screen so you can see all of them and determine sort of what's in all the pictures. And is there some other thing, like, is it the color of the frames that I'm supposed to put together? Is it the thing that's in the image that's supposed to be in order that makes sense? And like I said, you can do all the cat ones together. You can do all the beach ones together. And that makes sense to your brain. But every now and then I run into something in a puzzle where the game doesn't want that answer.
Okay.
Where I
you
sort
realize
of feel
you've just been like setting the table incorrectly your entire life.
Exactly. I'm just putting spoons on the wrong side. No, there's things. What's one of the ones that I thought was weird? I can't think of one of the ones where I just did not understand what it wanted me to do. Yeah, sorry. But there have been a couple where I've just sort of like, I really feel like this is the answer, guys. But the game does not accept that. It doesn't, because there's no like, you don't like type in your answer and hit submit. Like you arrange them in a way that sort of feels satisfying, and it feels like the game is sort of pushing you in that direction, or your sense of order as a human is pushing you in that direction. And then you get a little chime and a little star pops up that says you completed the level. And sometimes there's a little hollow star that's next to it that tells you, there's a second possible answer.
Find all the hidden waddle these.
Right, exactly. But every now and then, I've put them together in a way that like, this is the response. This is what it should look like. This is how I would do it if this was in my house, and the game doesn't want that.
I feel like you should be able to make a case for it. Just be like, so this is why this is here. This is why this other thing is over here.
I should patiently be able to explain this to Marie Kondo. This brings me joy, and here's why. So it can be a little oddly frustrating. The game is cool about if you can go into the menu and rather than giving you the option to skip or bypass it, the option is to let it lie.
Okay.
So you can click on that and it doesn't ding you any points. It doesn't give you raspberries. There's no like fail state or anything like that. It just swipes the screen on to the next organization challenge.
That's good. Is it like, are you expected that you'll go back and like puzzle it out somewhere later, or are you just declaring that you've arranged it in a way that you're satisfied with?
I guess your choice. I've played quite an hour or two of this thing so far, and I've not had the opportunity to go back and retry some of those puzzles that have multiple solutions, or the one or two that I've just sort of let lie. The secondary effect here is that it's really hard to Google, like, how do I set the table correctly in a little to the left, because there's like 8 or 9 puzzles that sort of hit that way, and it's not quite ungoogleable, but it's weird and dense enough that it's hard to sort of find answers on the internet for some of them. So I've had to let a couple of them lie.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I like that. I mean, especially it works well for this game. I don't know how well that would adapt to other puzzle games. Like, you certainly couldn't just be like in Portal, like, I think the cube should be over here, and now I'm going to go to the next room.
Right.
But
because Portal has a very sort of, and the Entropy Center, which I've been playing recently, have a very sort of clear like structure of how the physics in that world work.
And
it's
but
not
in this
left
one,
to
it's
your...
like, it's potentially so subjective that you just be like, I think I did it right, so that's that.
I can let it lie. Exactly. There is a hint system, and I have a little bit of a problem with this too, in that it's not like a hint for me would be sort of like, if you're putting the books in order, like, hey, try maybe think about what's on the spine of the books. like that's a hint, but the hint in this just shows you the answer.
Oh, okay. Just like do it like this. And yeah.
So it's not so much a hint as it is just showing you the solution.
Yeah.
Which I, after once or twice sort of checking that, I'm like, well, I'm not going to do hints anymore because that's not fun for me. It obfuscates it a little bit because it's a picture, like a pencil drawing of the answer, and it's all scribbled over. So you could take a little virtual eraser and you can erase bits of the picture. So I guess if you're like trying to figure out like what's the piece I start with or how does it begin, you can sort of erase kind of one side of the answer. But for the most part, you're just erasing the whole thing and it's showing you the response. solution. So yeah, the hint system feels a little broken.
That's a little questionable. It's kind of creative, but not especially good for like drip feeding you the solution.
Yeah, but the rest of this thing feels very much like it is a product of sort of the current state of like wholesome games or cozy games, and that you're not like farming or anything like that, but it's pretty low stakes. It's kind of cutesy. There's a cat in it. You get a little bit of kind of emergent story of the relationship between this couple and their cat and stuff like that. And the music is sort of like light jazz for you to organize things by. So it's got kind of a cool, kind of funky soundtrack. And I'm like, oh, this is like the culmination of like every sort of wholesome, no fail state, kind of low stakes video game turned somehow into a puzzle game about kind of organizing this couple's life.
Yeah. Man, I've played so many games this year that are essentially just doing chores, but just making an interesting game out of it.
Yeah.
It seems like it would fit right in there.
Oh, perfectly. Absolutely. So this is called A Little to the Left. It's on, I'm playing it on Switch. I'm not sure what else it's on, but I'm having a good time with it. A couple little nagging things about it notwithstanding. It definitely feels like kind of my energy and my sort of like, I don't know, weird sort of muscle reflex thing when it comes to video games where I'm sort of like, oh, I'm very good at this. And that keeps me going and keeps me moving on to the next one and next one and next one. It's satisfying. So A Little to the Left.
Man, I really like that Let It Lie feature. I'm just trying to think of what other games I've played where that would come in handy.
Yeah.
It's really good though.
Yeah. I want like a Little to the Left too, where there's a button that says plead your case.
Yeah.
And it opens up a live chat window and you can just talk to a developer about like, here's why I think this should be a solution.
It's like, you don't get to challenge somebody's Scrabble word or whatever if you're playing Video Boggle or
right,
whatever it is. But like you should be able to.
Yeah, I agree.
Sometimes you are correct and the game is not. Or at least that's how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a funny story that I'm trying to remember the details of. That's basically that. There was a puzzle game that I was stumped in, and I found the Discord for that developer, and there was somebody sort of voicing an objection to that puzzle. And the developer immediately responded and said, no, you're right. That's absolutely a mistake. We screwed that up. We're going to fix it in the next patch.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, it's not me. It's not just me. I think it was what was the game earlier I played this year about the Bigfoot Museum? Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yes. The Bigfoot Museum game. No, I have no idea. Was that a real game?
With apologies to our listeners, I'll look it up. I can't remember it right now, but
was it a Curious Monster Expedition or whatever?
That's it. The Monsters Expedition. Yeah. Through puzzling exhibitions. Good job, TJ.
Were you Bigfoot in that game?
You were a big monster. You were like a Sasquatch or something. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were like a little like blobby thing. Well, I have no idea.
So the other game I've been kind of hooked on this week is Pentiment.
What is this about?
Just a few hours of this. This is an adventure game. I think this is sort of the natural progression of Disco Elysium, where it's kind of an adventure game. It's kind of an RPG, but it has some really strange mechanics in a very weird setting. It feels like sort of this elevated kind of next level like RPG experience. It takes place in 15th century Brussels, I believe. And you are a traveling artiste, an artisan, who is currently employed by the big church in this medieval village, copying ancient texts, essentially. You sit in a scriptorium all day with a book open in front of you, and you copy it, which is how they reproduced books apparently back in the day.
Yeah.
But at the time that this is taking place, the printing press is just emerging.
Oh.
And there is rumors that the scriptorium might be shut down. And you would lose your job, and you would lose the house that you live in, which is made possible by the fact that you remain employed by the church and go to work every day copying ancient texts. From there, you start to make connections and learn the people that are living in this village. You get some slice of life palace intrigue about kind of the friction between kind of the people who live in the lower villages and the people who live on the hill, and live with sort of within the benefit of the church. There's a lot of other little personalities and quirks, and taxes are going up and people are feeling the pressure, and you're not a rich person, but you're educated and smart. So you have a way of sort of like connecting and kind of talking your way into and out of some things. It's very heavily dialogue driven. It's not doing dice rolls to sort of like do success checks during interactions like Disco Elysium did, but it does give you kind of a culmination of the choices that you've made up to that point, because you take different perspectives on things. Martin Luther is a very big kind of like figure looming over the course of this game, and you work for a church. And Martin Luther at the time apparently was proposing the dismantling of the structure of the church and how the Roman church has way too much influence over people's lives, and it was very revolutionary. So you have the option of like agreeing with somebody who talks about Martin Luther and his radical ideas, or you can stay quiet, or you can fight back. And all of those little choices weigh heavy on the minds of the people that you work for and work with every single day in the scriptorium, and the people whose house you sleep in every night in the village below, and on and on. And all of this sounds super dry and super boring as I'm saying it out loud to you.
Finally, the first video game about Martin Luther. Been waiting for it.
But it is such a cool game. Excuse me. I read a couple of reviews for this. It's developed by Obsidian, which I believe it is. Kidding. Yeah, it's the development team that actually did Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel or look anything like Fallout New Vegas, except that there is an RPG kind of buried in here. But it is this weird sort of slice of 15th century life. And then it turns into a murder mystery, which is surprising, is that some key player gets killed. Someone you like and work with every day in the scriptorium is accused of murder, and you are then trying to put together the pieces of like absolving them or actually placing the blame at their feet and somehow benefiting from that, and et cetera, et cetera. So it spirals off in a lot of very interesting and disparate directions. It's quite beautiful. The whole thing looks like medieval kind of line drawings with really interesting kind of characterizations.
Yeah.
As you speak to different people in the game, all of their text is in, I guess, historically accurate fonts. So as you talk to people who have like a higher station, because class is always a concern in this game. You talk to people who have a higher station, their text blocks are always in like very fine calligraphy or very sort of like, disciplined, fine lined text. You talk to people who are lower class, who are less educated, and their language on screen is depicted as sort of scribbling and scrawling. You can, if that's hard for you to read, and it is a little hard to read sometimes, you can turn it off and just use simple fonts. But I love sort of the devotion to the art style, indicating like the class of a character that you're interacting with.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. You do a lot of really interesting things with kind of the ancient texts. So there's a lot of like literary references and accurate historical references. And they're almost always done by animating some picture on a page full of essentially Latin, because it's all of these sort of ancient books that you're translating. But you're sort of animating images, beautiful like medieval Gothic images, inside walls of Latin text. So there's this whole really gorgeous and sort of constantly surprising sort of devotion to being kind of historically accurate. That I don't know. I think is really unusual for a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And super cool that it's not sort of just defaulting kind of to the easy things where it's like, oh, it's a sci-fi game like Fallout, or it's a fantasy game like Dragon Quest. It's a very unusual and unique setting and time and place in a video game. And it serves sort of this double lesson as kind of a cool history lesson with a lot of like really interesting and well-researched sort of things of that era, but it's got enough kind of like personality and hook and creativity to like, keep mine scatterbrained engaged for hours and hours.
Yeah. I've only seen I've seen a couple clips of this, and I've spent like a disproportionate amount of time just browsing screenshots of it online because it looks incredible. Like no other game uses this art style. I don't even know how to describe it. I think of like illuminated manuscripts comes to mind, but I think that's just referring to like the text in these pages, right, and not necessarily the actual illustrations. I don't really know what you call that art style.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know enough about art of this era to know what to even sort of call it.
Yeah, but it's like such a specific look, though. The other thing that it makes me think of is, the stupid meme where it's like me coming home absolutely twisted with a handful of swords or whatever. It's like, if you know what I'm talking about, it's that sort of visual, that sort of medieval, I guess, illustrated style. But it just from seeing the screens and everything, they have done an incredible job. Like it looks really authentic, and like I'm not a scholar of what this is supposed to look like, but it's all very plausible. And the way things animate, especially, is incredible to me. Like there's this one scene I saw where everybody's on a boat or something, and the water is animated, but the water is also drawn in a way where it just has that incredibly sort of distinctive and like weird, not really realistic style to it, like you would see in an old manuscript or something like that.
Right.
And the fact that they just like illustrated the entire game this way, and it feels like it all kind of like fits in and nothing really looks out of place, is just an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know exactly the scene you're talking about, and it's quite striking. It is. There's a lot in this game where, I mean, sometimes it's you just sort of like walking from point to point and talking to people and trying to make choices and basically choose your own adventure and role playing the character that you are. It has things in it where like you decide in the beginning that like maybe your personality type is a bit of a rogue. I think the game calls it a rapscallion. And you're always looking for like easy money and maybe you're a little duplicitous, or you can be a Latin scholar. And you could be very studious, and hey, some things in the game that are in Latin are translated for you. So there's a cool perk there, and et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's still an RPG. It's still very much you sort of occupying a role, and all of the sort of like the pluses and minuses that come with sort of defining that character. But yeah, beyond that sort of normal interaction stuff, which kind of feels like Persona sometimes, or pick another RPG. There is this very I don't know, just scholarly, insanely devoted and detailed commitment to being kind of appropriate to the 15th century that I've never seen a video game do before.
It really, like, I kind of know what the backstory is behind this, because it doesn't seem like, I mean, somebody on the Obsidian team must have been really set on making a game about like, let's do something around, the 15th century instead of, post-apocalyptic America or whatever.
Right.
Because, there are not enough games like that out there.
Yeah.
I thought the first time I saw this, I was like, is this a joke? Like, why does this game look like this? But it's amazing that they have sort of followed through with that in all aspects of it, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think the thing that it does that is sort of surprising to me is that it makes all of that very interesting. And that I think something that takes place sort of like, 15th century, and the church is bad, and the serfs constantly get stepped on. Like, it feels very rote. But Pentiment does a really good job of kind of imbuing that with character and friction, really sort of making this village and all of the people you interact with over the course of the day feel really alive. And the game takes place over such a long period of time that you see people sort of like grow up, and you see fortunes change for people, and you see the direct benefit of some of the choices that you make over time and stuff like that, or the detriment of your influence and your interaction with people. Because naturally, I chose to be a rapscallion. And that doesn't always end well for people other than you. So there's, it does some really, really interesting things with sort of longevity and storytelling and character building, that kind of, in a lot of ways kind of make up for what would otherwise be a kind of dry setting, I think.
Well, maybe there just hasn't been enough sort of media set there. I mean, I'm sure there has been, but not quite in a video game presented this way.
Yeah, certainly there's movies and stuff like that, but people are very into what else of this era, Vikings and things like that.
Sure,
but,
I was thinking it just turned into Assassin's Creed or something.
Right. One of the things that's really cool about this too, and I mentioned Persona, is that it does have it keeps you on a pretty tight schedule. It has like a day and night cycle, and it ushers you from one day to the next. So you don't get the benefit of just sort of leisurely making choices, of second guessing yourself. That hours pass, that a little calendar will come up, and it's sort of, I don't know if it's Gregorian. I think it's related to the church in some way. There's the little hours and the major hours, and they're all the hours of prayer throughout the course of the day. So you fast until this time, and then you have the major hours, and you have dinner, and there's an hour of prayer after that and stuff like that. So you're locked into the church's calendar and how they spend their day. Even if you role play a character who isn't necessarily a believer, but is just looking for a nice steady paycheck and a way to use your artistic skills, et cetera, et cetera. So again, there's friction there that if you want to explore it, the game sort of has room for. But like Persona, the game will present you with leads and things that you can do over the course of a day, but not enough time to do all of them.
Okay.
So it does create a little bit of tension sometimes, where you feel like you want to chase opportunities, or like I screwed a thing up and I wanted to go back and talk to somebody and sort of explain it, because I didn't want to burn a bridge with that person, but I didn't have enough time to be able to do something else on my calendar for the day that seemed very important. So it meant that I kind of pissed off somebody because I wasn't clear with them, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then I saw that person later in the game and I felt really bad, and they kind of gave me shit for abandoning them. And it's good. It's really clever. And it does kind of paint you into some corners sometimes, like Persona, where you're like, geez, I want to do everything, but the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And
I feel like that's like I enjoy that. When a game does that, it sort of forces you to go one way and never be able to go the other way.
Sure.
As long as I can just get over that initial hump, because I have that mindset of just like, I want to see everything. But I think it ultimately it makes for a more sort of interesting and engaging experience if you have to to make sacrifices.
And for me, it comes back to role playing. Like, what would my character do in this situation, right? And you have the ability to kind of like, pursue those thoughts down sort of the very specific avenues. To the possibility that the other things that you want to entertain are no longer an option for you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's cool. I really dig it. There's a lot going on here, and it's probably not for everybody, but the cool thing about this is that it's on Xbox Game Pass.
Is that the cool thing?
It's like, okay, I have a really weird game about 15th century Brussels that I want to sell you for $60.
Yeah.
Or you kind of play it for free on this thing that you already paid for.
Just check it out. No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So I probably would not have spent $60 on this, having watched the trailers and read some of the reviews, which have all been pretty enthusiastic. But the fact that I could just download it and jump into it, and holy crap, I'm hooked on this weird thing. And I played it for like 3.5 hours in a row the other day. I think it's really awesome that Game Pass sort of makes that a possibility. And I have to, venture a guess that a lot of people that are checking out Pentiment for the first time are exactly that scenario where it's sort of like, okay, well, I would not spend a ton of money on this unusual thing. But it's cool that it's kind of part of this package I already pay for.
Yeah. No, that was cool. I like when it was able to boost discoverability like that. It's
yeah,
great.
Absolutely. So again, this is called Pentiment. It's a very cool game. I want to. I'm going to keep playing it. Obviously, we don't have too many episodes left of this year, so expect me to talk more about this next year when we're back for our new season. But I'm quite into it, and if you have Xbox Game Pass, would encourage people to very much check it out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh man, we're all out of time to talk about God of War Ragnarok.
I've heard it's good. Have you heard it's good?
I heard, people seem to like it.
Yeah.
This is just me again going over my which games didn't I play that were on the Game of the Year list, and it's like Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok and some other thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I don't think I'll be making my way over to those this year.
I like the other God of War games. It seems very likely that I would play this new one at some point. It's just got a lot going on right now.
Yeah. A lot of stuff happening.
Not the least of which is our year-end Drunktacular episode. You have mere days left to ask us a question for our year-end wrap-up. And to join us on our live stream on Friday, December 9th, go to VGHangover.com/drunk for more information about that and how you can contribute. While you're there, you can get notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. What else would we encourage you to do? We would encourage you to join our Discord. You can ask us questions there. You can interact with us, hang out and talk about video games and all kinds of other stuff. We are a little light on Pokemon content on this podcast, but there is no shortage of that on the Discord. So if you're a Pokemon person and want to talk about the new game, there's certainly some of that conversation happening on our Discord right now. People wondering
quite urgently,
should I play it? Should I play some of the other ones? Did I miss a good one, et cetera, et cetera? So if you have strong opinions about Pokemans, join our Discord. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com as well.
Yeah.
We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. It helps us quite a bit to find new listeners. Help us out. Maybe tell your friends about the show too. That goes a long way to boosting those numbers and helping us connect with more folks.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So spread word of mouth, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
We'd like to give one final thanks to Saria Lemus for our intro and outro music this week and over the last few months. We have our music show coming up next week, so we'll have different music. But if you'd like to hear more of Saria Lemus's work, you can go to pettypanol.bandcamp.com, load all those albums into your cart, hit checkout. That would be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be back next week with the aforementioned music episode. What our favorite video game music of 2022? That's the proposition here, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Cool.
All those cool vampire songs. We're gonna squeeze them in there.
I gotta start making a list. We'll be back then. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.